Last week, we talked about the possibility that lowering regulations by the Trump administration on meatpacking plants and other large manufacturers of food, making it easier for diseases to spread in the future, that could lead to future coronaviruses. But perhaps we were looking too far into the future, because right now it's looking like this disease could continue to be spread as well as others because of those regulations that have already been changed. So plants are starting to close down because some of them are having waves of coronavirus cases. We've got an example of that. Last week, Smithfield shut down one of the largest pork plants in the country after hundreds of employees contracted the coronavirus. Hundreds! The plant in South Dakota, whose output represents 4 to 5% of U.S. pork production, is reported to be the largest single-source coronavirus hotspot in the U.S. with more than 600 cases. That is amazing. The conditions that would result in 600 employees at one place getting the disease, the idea that that wouldn't result in the disease being spread on anything that they were producing seems incomprehensible, Brett.
I think the very obvious solution to this is just put disinfectant in your meat. Like when you get your food, you know how a lot of people, you can brine it to get it a little juicier. I say just like take a little bit of Comet and pop, pop, pop. A little salt, a little pepper, a little
peppercorns,
abrasive
maybe
blanqueador, bam, bam, bam.
Mm-hmm. You want to form a light crust over the pork.
Also, UV light is really effective on this. So if you're going to eat breakfast, why not do it on the surface of the sun?
I've heard rumors that the coronavirus can't survive on the surface of the sun. And look, just in case, Brett's being sarcastic, everybody.
But yeah. Have to say, yeah.
So it's spread. Now, we've seen spreads of coronavirus in a lot of other workplaces because some of these companies, first of all, it's very easy to spread, but also many of these companies aren't doing what's necessary to protect their employees. And thankfully, there have been some politicians that have done a good job of pointing that out. But we are also worried about the fact that some of the food might be contaminated with it as well. And if it is, we know one reason why that's possible. That's because of the deregulation that's been done over the past 4 months or so by the Trump administration. They've been lobbied by the meat producers. They don't want to slow down the lines so that inspectors can take a look at all the food that they're putting out. And so they've been lobbying for speed increases, and they've gotten it. So the latest line speed increases mean 11 poultry plants have been given waivers to operate higher line speeds in the past fortnight. That is entirely during the pandemic. A number of beef and pork plants have also been given waivers. The move will allow the additional chicken factories to slaughter as many as 175 birds a minute, the equivalent of 3 per second. And it's not like they weren't already slaughtering a lot. Traditionally, it was 140 birds a minute, and 4 inspectors would be expected to look at 140 birds every minute. Now, it's 3 a second, and you have not 4 inspectors, you have 1 inspector. So each inspector is expected to notice the presence of trace amounts of fecal matter that could have disease in it on 3 birds every second. The sentence that I just said was dozens and dozens of birds long, effectively. How could they possibly catch these sorts of infections? And of course, they can't, and they won't, but the meatpacking plants don't care because they're going to be able to make more money by shipping out more birds in less time.
Right, and this is the central thrust, and thematically it's all linked, right? The moneyed interests who have sway in Washington, who can affect actual change, don't care about you. They're scientifically incompetent, and that's convenient because if they weren't scientifically incompetent, they would understand the actual consequences of their actions. And even like a capitalist society, in a truly capitalist society, their logic is if we miss a certain amount of medical issues, people will die, and if our source causes people to die, then people will just find another source. And that is supply and demand and the market taking care of it. But that's not what happens in actuality. Every time these major companies fail, they don't have to pay the consequences. And the ability of the EPA, or whoever it is, the FDA, the regulating body to turn a blind eye to this proves that. Mm-hmm. They're just like, yeah, whatever you need, always whatever you need. Always whatever you need, because you are donating to my campaign. You are the ones that I actually care about. And when it comes to food safety, so the food you eat, and then testing certain drugs, the hydrochloroquine push by the president, and now this this bleach push by the president that's only for political points, then they want you to be the guinea pig. They want you to suffer from it.
Yeah.
And then the mayor of Las Vegas saying, she literally said, I offered for Las Vegas to be essentially the guinea pig in seeing just how bad it would be if we let it go. She's not going to go out on the streets of Las Vegas. She's going to sit up in her own house, with her husband, because she's just essentially royalty in Vegas because her husband was the mayor. Like, they don't have to incur any of the negative consequences. I'm going to talk about this later in the show too. In Garbage People, there are people that are willing to make you go out. You be the civil disobedient ones. You be the one who incurs all of the actual negative consequences of this, because if you do that, then I, the moneyed interest, have a better chance of making more money than I already have, which is historically at disproportionate levels to how it's been in the history of America.
Yeah, and look, everything that you're saying now is true, and we need to focus on it during this time too, especially because some of these regulation changes have, as we said, happened in the last fortnight. But many people in the chat are pointing out a lot of the issues that we're talking about were also present beforehand, and of course that's true, and we've been talking about this for some time. It's just getting worse now because they continue to speed up the lines, they continue to strip away the inspectors. It has shocked me over the past few years how little public acknowledgement there is of, like we get some of the industries that have a lot of power and authority over politics, but like the food manufacturers are often given a pass on that. It's not just pharma, it's not just the tech companies, it's not just the fossil fuel companies. Like, they have been so overwhelmingly powerful and successful in influencing government policy in regards to the food, the way it's produced, the way it's consumed, recommendations from the government. That goes back decades and decades and decades. And while we're right to point out the daily death toll from coronavirus, the daily death toll from diet-related chronic illnesses, that didn't just come from nowhere. That is affected by government policy. It's affected by these massive food manufacturers, both in meat and in other products as well.
And it's always it's always an equilibrium that you have to find. Like, I am not for or against regulations. I am for good regulations, and I'm against bad regulations. And that is inherent in progressivism. And it's ironic that food is where they're getting the laxest, because aside from shirtwaist factories, the jungle where they slaughter food was the beginning of the progressive movement in terms of common sense regulations that protect people from the atrocities committed by companies who rely on bailouts or just you dying to make a buck.
Yeah. Oh God. I'll end with a positive note. I have been saying for a long time, and I get attacked every time I say it, but there are meat substitutes that I find to be just as good as actual meat. And I'm not a vegetarian. I do still eat meat, but I eat a lot less of it because of how good the substitutes have become. And lately, beyond sausage, it is more expensive than actual sausage, but it is, in most uses, just as good as the real thing. And consider it, because sausage was never a very high quality product, and it is getting worse on a weekly basis.
Right. You don't want to see how the Beyond sausage is made.
Yeah. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.